It's a chilly day here in Texas, which means that there's never been a better time to talk about resource automation using productive bees. Productive bees in mystical agriculture have for a very long time been the top two options that people use for generating resources. And that's mostly due to the fact that they're the most effective at it. In general, I've always been a huge proponent of mystical agriculture, but as I've started delving a little bit more into productive bees, it's been a lot more fun, and I can definitely see why people choose it over mystical agriculture. This video is intended to be a part 2 to a video I've already uploaded, which is sort of a beginner's guide to productive bees. So in this video, we're going to skip everything we covered in the first video. I'll talk about it a little bit, but from there, we're going to move on to talking a little bit more about how to optimize your auto crafts, how to make the best centrifuges, how to make the most optimal bee with all of the best traits that you need, and then finally how to build a really fully optimized setup that allows you to make the best use of the space that you have. So if you're looking for any of those things, this is the video for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. All right, so in the last video, there are a couple things that I have changed since then. You'll notice that we had all of this set up just like we did. We have our breeding chamber, we can breed bees, we can incubate the bees, make them grow up quicker. We have our bottler, our powered centrifuge, and our gene indexer. All of these things, including the beehives, were built in the last video. So those will all not be covered in this video. If you're interested in any of those things, please go check out the last video. Now, there are a couple of things that we changed that are worth going through. First of all, in the last video, I was unaware that you could actually keep the piston above the bottler down, and it'll squish any bees that get placed inside of there. So for instance, if I were to place a bee against the back wall, I don't actually have to flip the lever to squish the bee. It will automatically get squished and put into a bottle. Saves you time and is a lot easier. In addition to that, I was also unaware that if you upgrade to the heated centrifuges instead of just the powered centrifuges, they can actually process the comb blocks rather than just the combs themselves, which means I don't have to send the comb blocks over to my ME system to be processed into combs to be sent back to be processed into whatever resource it is. I can just do it all right here. So my process here has become incredibly simplified by the fact that it just has to pull the resources out of the beehives, put them into the powered centrifuges, and then pull all of that using these import buses back into the ME system. It's a much better way to do it, and I think it's definitely the way I'll do it in the future. Now, one other side note that's worth mentioning before we get into the real meat of this video is how to best optimize the auto crafts. Using the powered centrifuge, we end up getting a whole lot of honey. And in general, what we have to do is we have to combine this honey with a bottle to create honey bottles in order to craft anything that we want to craft, like the omega upgrades or the gamma upgrades or anything like that. You'll notice if we select one of these right here, it'll show that it's actually just using the honey liquid. And that's because we changed the way that we set up our patterns. In the pattern creation process, you're actually able to use this second button here, which is fluid substitution, which allows you to use a fluid that you have in your ME system directly instead of having to craft that into a bucket of something or a bottle of something. This means instead of having to craft honey bottles to make these honey treats, it's able to use the honey directly from the ME system, which saves on a ridiculous amount of crafts, especially when you're looking at a craft list the size of the Omega upgrade. So if you've built a really fast auto crafting system, but you're still having issues with all of those productive bee crafts, make sure that the patterns that you create go through, and for each of them, have this fluid substitution turned on. Now, this doesn't work for everything, but for all of the productive bee stuff that I've done, it definitely does work. On top of that, like we talked about earlier, the centrifuge that I was using before was the powered centrifuge, and it does not allow you to use comb blocks. It only takes combs. So make sure that you upgrade all the way to the heated centrifuge if you want to be able to process through the actual blocks of combs. All right, so with those out of the way, let's actually start talking about how to make the most optimal bee. And for the sake of this video, I'm actually going to be walking through this process so that we can do this together. Now, there are a lot of different traits that bees will get you. By an example of this, if you go into our gene indexer, you got productivity, endurance, you've got type samples, you've got all kinds of stuff in here. Weather behavior, tempers, there's all kinds of stuff. However, the majority of those do not matter if you are using Omega upgrades or at least simulation upgrades to begin with. So if you're using simulation upgrades, you only need to worry about 3 specific things. The first one is very high productivity, the second one is metaneural, and the third one is any weather tolerance. I'm going to walk through how to get each one of those traits because they all have specific processes for them, and then we'll walk through how to actually apply them to your bees. So first things first, in order to get very high productivity, you're going to need to make a bee nest helmet. Bee nest helmet right here. All it is a bee nest and a diamond helmet. So plop those two things right on into a crafting terminal, a crafting station, whatever you want to use, and then get yourself a bee nest helmet. This can go anywhere a head slot is, so it can go on your head in the curio slots. It can go in place of your helmet, wherever you want to put it. We're going to put it over here for now. And as you can see, it says it has a 30% chance to spawn a kamikaze bee. That's actually exactly what we're trying to do. So grab yourself some bee cages, and then all you really have to do is go find any mob that's going to hit you. I don't really know exactly where to go, so I think we're probably going to go to the other, just because there's a ridiculous number of mobs there. And then once we're here, we'll fly up to the surface. All right, here's our piglets again. We're gonna let them hit us. Oh, I saw that one. I saw the one. It's just so impossible to catch. So these kamikaze bees are incredibly small, and it's almost impossible to see them and catch them. Trying to click on him is the worst. There he is. There he is. Grab him. I couldn't grab him. Oh, I got one. I got one. There he is. So you see the productivity on him is very high. So that's what we're looking for. So now, so this is how we're going to start getting the very high productivity. And then from there, all we have to do also to showcase the thing that we were talking about earlier, you drop it in here and it creates that bee matter, the bee material that we were talking about earlier. From there, we throw it through a power centrifuge. We get our gene sample, but we also get our productivity, which again is very high. So you're going to want to grab a couple of these. So that way we can get our gene sample to as close to 100% as possible. Ideally, you want it to actually be 100%. So I'm going to go back and grab one more real quick. Very high, 47%. So from there, we can take all of our productivity genes and combine it with a honey treat. So we'll take a honey treat, throw it in here, put the very high in here at 47%. We'll take the next very high at 47%, which gets us up to 94. And then finally, the last one is 100%. So I'm going to take a starry bee and show this next part. So we will grab one of those guys. Grab our starry bee, and what we're going to do is we're going to spawn the starry bee in, we're going to feed it the honey treat, and then we're going to pick it back up. So spawn it in, feed it the honey treat, pick it back up. You'll see now it has that same high productivity on it. Now what you're going to want to do when you start this is you're going to want to use a pokey upgrade on whatever hive has the bee with the very high productivity. That way you can start getting that very high productivity gene sample back and put into your ME system or wherever you're putting it. It helps a lot so you don't have to go catch a whole bunch of kamikaze bees. It's just the first time in order to get that initial high productivity gene sample, you have to go through the process. And after that, whenever you continue to create bees, you can just have it for you ready to go. To show you what that looks like, just so we're on the same page, if we were to create a pokey gene sampler, and we were to, in place of one of the Omega upgrades on here, put it in there, and then we speed this thing up using our time wand, you'll see that over time, some of the gene samples from the bees in here actually get dumped out into here. So that's how we're going to continue to make more high productivity gene samples. Now again, this is probably more efficient and effective if the only bee you have in here is the starry bee. It's not for me, but that would be the way to go. All right, so that's how you get high productivity. That's the first gene sample that matters. The second one is metaneural. And there's a decent chance that some of the behaviors you have in here are already at that point. If they're not, the easiest way to set them up and make them where they are is to get some leads. You're probably going to have a whole bunch of these from killing your wandering traders. Get yourself a fence post, and then you're just going to take some bees with you. It doesn't really matter what bees they are or what they do. As long as they are not currently metaneural, they will work perfectly. So we're going to grab 5 of these. We will bring them all with us, and then we're going to head up to the surface. Now, this is the only one that really takes any reasonable amount of time. You're going to want to make sure that you're free from any mobs. You're also a reasonable ways away. You're also going to want to make sure that you're not near any actual beehives that they could go into. So clear out a little area. Put yourself down a fence post. Take the bees that you're going to want to upgrade to metaneural, toss them down, lasso them, and then tie them to this post. I may have set that bee on fire, but if you leave them out here long enough, they will switch from dineural to nocturnal to eventually metaneural. I'm going to give this guy a honey treat so that he doesn't die because I did smack him with my sword on accident. So make sure to keep these alive. Like I said, eventually dineural, nocturnal, metaneural. That's how this will go. And it may take a little bit of time to do that. But again, once you do it with the first batch, if you use one of those Pokegene Sampler upgrades on the beehive, then you'll be able to get that behavior from the bees themselves. So that way, you don't have to go through this process with every single bee that you want to upgrade. You just have to do it for the first one so that you can have the gene trait that you actually want. All right, we're going to leave those there for a bit. It should take a couple of days to actually transfer them all the way out. Now, the third and final trait is any weather tolerance. And this one can be a little bit harder to find. You may have it already depending on the type of bees that you've got. The weather tolerances are usually the blue gene samples. As you can tell, none is usually the most common. However, there are two easier ways to get this. Number one, your bees that you're setting up to get metaneural might actually get it depending on the weather that is out while they're out here. If they're out in the rain, they will most likely develop weather tolerance. In addition to that, if you want it to be easier, you can go fishing for some prismarine bees, and those will most likely have the any weather tolerance. Now, I already have a whole bunch of prismarine bees from going to fish for the Patrick bee and for oily bees, but really all you have to do is go fishing in a frozen ocean, a cold ocean, an ocean, or a deep, lukewarm ocean. They all have to be the deep oceans, but anywhere in there, you can find yourself a prismarine bee. You'll notice on these prismarine bees, they have a weather tolerance of any, which means that they will work through any weather, which is exactly what we're looking to have. So again, all we have to do is take these bees, drop them right in here, get ourselves that bee material, run it through the centrifuge, take everything out of there, grab the any weather tolerance, get yourselves a couple more squish bee materials, and then we can just combine on a honey treat the gene samples that we want to add. We'll add all three of these, get a 100% weather tolerance any gene sample. Then just like before, we can grab the bee that we actually want to put this on, place it down, feed it the honey treat, and then pick it back up. Now this starry bee has a weather tolerance of any. So that right there is how you fully optimize any bee that you want to be fully optimized in all the mods 10. You get your very high productivity, your any weather tolerance, and your metaneural behavior. Now it's important to note that in addition to doing that, you can also use a time wand or time in a bottle, or possibly even soul searching to speed these up dramatically. And you'll get a ton more resources out of here, and you'll get a bunch more of the gene samples. Now, in my case, I also have to dramatically increase the resource gathering rate so that it actually picks it all up and puts it in here. Now, in addition to that, I did want to bring up that there is a better way to optimize your setup for space than what I have here. To actually fully optimize a bee setup for space and for efficiency, what you're going to want to do is find a little area where you can put two feeding slabs right on top of each other. These are going to be on the ground, and each one of these you can actually put 3 in. So you'll be able to put 6 different items in each one of these feeding slabs, which means that if you have a bee like the lumberjack bee, you can put several different types of wood in here, or one of each of the items that you're going to want for each of these bees. Next up, you're going to take your expansion boxes and your beehives, and you're going to place them all the way around, just like this. And now each one of these is facing the feeding slab in the middle, which means they will all use that in order to feed off of. From there, you can add all of your omega speed upgrades, put your bees in here, and then right click the feeding slab in the middle, put any of the bee flowering materials that you need for the bees in your beehives on the feeding slab in the middle. This is by far the most efficient way to do this. You can end up housing 20 bees in here with 6 different types of feeding, all in a very simple 3x3 square. This can then be repeated several times over just to make it more efficient. And so for instance, if you're trying to compare this to mystical agriculture where you have like a normal 9x9 square for resources, this is by far the more efficient way to do it. You can fit a lot more different types of bees in the same amount of space that you could in a normal crop plot. In addition to that, because I got so many questions on the last video about how to find a feeding or flowering material, to show you how to do that, if you search for a bee in here, say for instance the draconic bee, and then right click on it, up at the top it will show you the beehive production. It will show you the breeding that you can do with that bee. Again, right click on the draconic bee, and then we'll also show you the bee flowering. So this dragon egg is the flowering material that the draconic bee needs. Can't be anything else, won't work with anything else. So you have to have for each bee the flowering material, and that's how you find it. Now, if I missed anything, or if there's anything you think I could actually improve on in this setup, or if there's anything that I totally misrepresented, please leave those down in the comment section below. There's a lot of people that are asking me questions, actively trying to learn how to optimize their productive bee setup. So any input that you have, I consider very valuable. That's it for this video. Don't forget, you're special, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.